Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming. Thanks for being here this morning. My name is Denise Hicks. I work at a consultancy called C-Space. Our job is to bring brands and businesses closer to their stakeholders, customers, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, really so that they're better grounded in what people want and need. And we do that through research and co-creation. And one of the things we really truly believe, which is important for today, is that stronger relationships really do build stronger businesses. And that's no more important for sustainability than it is for anything else. It's kind of really, really crucial because, of course, your sustainability strategy is only as good as the relationships that you have with all of those different stakeholders. So we're going to be talking about that today. We've got an incredible panel, I'm sure you'll agree, here, of incredible talent. But before we get on to them, I'd quite like to know who's in the audience and just have a bit of a show of hands. Two questions, really. The first, I guess, is where you're at on your journey with sustainability, by which I mean, you know, are you just starting out? Are you here to learn everything because you're just setting up a business, all the way through to, we feel like pros, we've literally been doing this for decades. So 3 stages I'm going to go through. If you're at the beginning of your sustainability journey, you're here like a sponge soaking it all up. Can you put your hands up? Hands higher. I need to see them. Oh, that's better. Okay, good. A good selection there. If you're kind of in the middle, you're well on your way, you're kind of getting into your stride. All right. Good. Excellent. Majority, I'd say. And then experts, any pros out there? I feel like you've been doing this for a long time. Are you willing to be? Go to her for all the questions. That's all you need to know. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And just last question before we get on to the panel. Who here is in a leadership role, leadership team, calling the shots? Okay, not loads. So the rest of you are on your way up. That's important. You're going to be learning a lot today. Okay, thank you so much. Right, so on to our wonderful panel here today. The first question I guess to ask you is just give us a bit of an intro if you don't mind. And particularly if you could do so, just giving us a bit of a landscape setting as well in terms of where you're at on your journey and what you're currently focusing on, what the hot topics are for today. So I'm going to start with Vera. You're so far away from me, but there you are, down the end.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Vera Kukic, partner in IBM Consulting. I run the strategy and sustainability practices for the UK market in financial services, and also have the privilege of sitting on the Thames Estuary Growth Board, which is a public-private partnership for focusing on levelling up and the fairness agenda in the estuary. So that also plays a significant role. I will answer the question from a financial services sector perspective in terms of where the market is at the moment and what the focus is. I think we're all on the journey. There's different levels of maturity. I think where the focus is right now is operationalizing sustainability. So we've set targets, we've set ambitions, we've written strategies and visions, and we're now at that tipping point about saying, how do we execute this? So a lot of conversations around operationalizing execution. How do we move from talking to actually doing? And there's, of course, a number of lenses that play a role into that, from challenges around data, challenges around people, skills, education, buy-in through the kind of full management stack in terms of, you know, we've got leadership that believes, new generations that believe, and then kind of the middle management layer, which we kindly call permafrost in between, that we need to kind of move the dial on to get things going. I'll pause there because I'll give everyone else an opportunity to also...
Thanks, Vera. Yeah, we'll come back to the permafrost. That's a great title. Emily, hi.
Hello, my name is Emily Taylor. I'm Vice Chair of Women in Climate Tech. I am not a CSO, but we do run a CSO network, so we hear a lot from our members about what the challenges are in the community. I also work in branding and communications, and I think for our clients that we work with, the pressure is coming, of course, from the regulatory side, which is what's kind of kicked off their sustainability journey, but also the continued pressure, particularly for consumer brands, is coming from the consumers themselves. We know that millennial audiences, Gen Z audiences are a lot more sustainability minded. 39% choose to purchase from brands that have demonstrably lowered their carbon emissions. And in terms of where we're at today, it's about picking out those threads of really high fidelity, transparent stories of sustainability that can actually prove and don't contribute to the greenwashing narrative. So I think that's a main challenge we're
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to touch more on some of those subjects later. Thanks. Rhian.
Hello, I'm Rhian Kelly, the CSO at National Grid. And I think we're also still on the journey and probably in that execution phase. We've established what it means to us to be a responsible business and the material areas that most matter to our business, so the environment, our own people, and also the communities where we operate. And we've set all of this out in a responsible business charter where we've got targets, and we report annually on that in our responsible business report. We've just set, a year ago actually, although it feels like yesterday, we've just had our near-term targets, emissions reduction targets, validated by the Science Based Targets Initiative. They're now aligned to 1.5 degrees in the Paris Climate Agreement. So we're really proud of that. And the other things that we've done in terms of execution, and I guess this is the point about you can do it at the top, but does it cascade into the business? We have included ESG sustainability measures in our long-term performance plan, so it's part of the reward for our senior leaders. And then the last year we've embedded it in all of our monthly, quarterly performance management across the business. And then also it's embedded in our financial planning, which we do yearly. So there's an hour track that's non-financial measures, and that includes all of our responsible business commitments. And I think we find too that there's a lot of people who join National Grid because they value and they want to work for a business with purpose, and they want to work on solving climate change, and they want to work on net zero. But there's still I think there's a mindset piece which I think we're going to come on to, which is you can have all this framework in place, but you've still got people, what they do every day to take this into account and to sort of drive into it. And I'm going to stop talking there because I think there's lots more we'll all come back to on this.
Thanks very much. Karen.
Thank you. My name is Karen Pflug. I'm the CSO of Ingka Group, which is IKEA's largest retailer. And then when you sort of ask the question where you're on your journey, I instantly think of my personal journey, actually, because I'm relatively new to the sustainability space, and I want to sort of hopefully help inspire and lift up others to think you don't have to be a sustainability guru and live your whole career in sustainability to become a CSO. So I'm sort of almost 3 years into the journey. Started as a textile designer and then moved into business transformation, and then now very humbled and proud to drive the sustainability agenda for IKEA. And then, of course, many of you will know IKEA as a brand, Swedish company, been around for 80 years, and without even knowing about it right from the start, Ingvar Kamprad, our founder, had a really big focus on being very careful with resources, very careful with money. He said that he wrote The Testament of a Furniture Dealer in 1972, which is our little book that we all still live by many, many years later, 50 years later, where he talks about waste being a sin and how to be careful with quality and durability. And then we had our first environmental policy in the early 90s, and then we're driving our sustainability strategy now throughout the business, aligned with the science-based targets as well, committed to the Paris Agreement. Since we set our baseline in 2016, from a climate perspective, we have managed to decouple growth and climate across all scopes 1, 2 and 3. 24% reduction with a 30% growth in revenue. So we hope that then inspires others to bring that along. And then other areas that we're proud of around sustainability beyond climate are things like our gender parity that we've spent 2 decades really focusing on, and it takes time. So making sure across our management teams around the world, even in challenging markets, we have 50-50 gender parity at all levels of management and co-workers. And we've made our country managers, who are the CEOs in their different countries running the IKEA business, they are also CSOs. And that's not just symbolic, but we want them to really take ownership. And similar to National Grid, we have a balanced scorecard approach where they are measured on a wider range of parameters beyond the usual financials. So we follow up and measure as well, which helps, as well as the culture and values.
Thanks, Karen. Loads to dip into there actually for later. Certainly, we'll get into things like performance metrics. The inclusivity angle, I think, is really interesting as well. Thank you. Lame, hi.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Vera. I head up innovation and sustainability for the customer business at SSE, one of the largest energy companies here in the UK across GB and Ireland. And on that journey, I think we've kind of come at it two-pronged approach. So we had the top-down, which was really the PLC setting the focus and the direction of travel. So we've had a net zero strategy for over 10 years. And then we set our SBTI targets 2021. And then since then, each business unit has now been on the journey of operationalizing that net zero action plan. And so in my role in the customer business is actually 3 ways that we're looking at it. First is bringing our colleagues on the journey with us, because I think it's important. If you're going to tell your sales force to go sell net zero, they need to have the language. And so we've been doing a lot of sustainability launch and learns and awareness programs internally to engage with our colleagues, because everybody wants to be part of it, but not everybody's at the same level of knowledge. So that's the first thing we did. Then the second thing we did is really then working with the customers on their journey to net zero, recognizing that each customer will be very different and transition means different things to different sectors and different customer segments. And then the third thing we've been working on is then with our supply chain, because we cannot deliver the scale of decarbonization that is required without a supply chain, and many supply chain members are small, medium-sized enterprises, and so we've been working with business in the community, providing business mentoring to help them start their climate action plan and just get started, because unless we help them, they will fall off the cliff and they will not be able to participate in any procurement process, so there is no point. We really have to hold their hands, and we're a much bigger organization, so for us, the S in ESG is what we really focus on as a business unit. We do a lot on the E from the generation side in terms of decarbonizing the electrons we produce, but from a retail perspective, it's really about people, so people are really core. Without the customers, we have no business. Without our supply chain, we cannot deliver, and so we're creating a lot of partnerships and collaboration across the 3 segments between our employees, our customers, and our supply chain.
Thanks, Lemmy. Brilliantly set up those 3 areas for me. Wonderfully. Thanks. And I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? At the end of the day, businesses are made of people, systems are made of people. All of this is about relationship building, partnership building. And I'm interested to know, obviously, across the business, as with society, you have different levels of engagement, different levels of adoption. There'll be people who are early adopters in your grad scheme as much as there may be at your leadership. So where does the movement come from? Is it just kind of top down? Do you get a groundswell of energy and movement in the less senior levels? How is that kind of filtered through the business, and how is it generated in the business? Brianne?
I'm going to start by just building on what you said. Sorry, I'm going to bounce back, but you said you don't need to be in sustainability all your life. I'm about 18 months into being the CSO. Actually, most of my career has been in corporate affairs and started off in sort of public affairs and policy and advocacy. So I think that's the brilliant thing about sustainability. You can find a role in it without having had a whole history in it. Sorry, I digress and come back to. So I was going to. I think others will add, but one of the very specific things that we do, so I sort of talked a little bit about the framework and the performance management and the reward at the top and the commitments. But what we've also found, as you said, that there's this sort of groundswell upwards. So we have what we call a sustainability leaders alliance, and it's sort of colleagues in the business action. It's not even really run by anybody in our central team, but it's people who want to know more about what is going on, what the business is doing, and so we use them as a way as our champions in the business. We have one with about 50-50 UK-US, so we have one in the UK and one in the US, and they want to know what is happening and what the top-down thing is, but I think they also want to know what can we do about it, and I think they want to be reminded, how does my role contribute to this, and how am I in my job, and how is my job linked to this purpose that we have at National Grid for leading the energy transition. So that's a sort of really tangible way, like creating, I guess, like you have employee resource groups, you have a sustainability network in the business at sort of grassroots level.
Just to build on that, so we've also got a sustainability steering committee which is made up of employees, and the idea there is to actually crowdsource the ideas, because I lead innovation and sustainability as a combined portfolio. All of the innovation cannot come from over there because the innovation sits with the frontline workers. So having them in that steering committee, we get really fresh ideas and they're able to input, because the North Star is very clear at the corporate level. It's external facing, the investors like it. So, and it's also embedded in our leadership incentives at the top. But then everyone is wondering, how does my job today tie to that? And so we're helping them to understand, that story about the janitor in NASA. What are you doing? I'm helping put a man on the moon. And so through the steering committees, we're getting that engagement at the employee level, but then also getting great ideas is a really great way to crowdsource input, because you just don't have enough resources. Sustainability is like strategy. You're really always stressed for resources, and the employees want to help. And so really using them, leveraging them, has been very successful for us. And we've been running it now for 2.5 years, and we have oversubscription, really.
I just want to add to that from a financial services sector, very similar in terms of what everyone's doing across the market. Absolutely at the top level, metrics are embedded from a PR perspective. Yes, amazing messaging and therefore need to do the right thing. The younger generations are definitely involved, looking for ways to make it meaningful, so having the networks and the structures helps. It's also rewarding those networks and structures and making sure that there is a balanced view from different backgrounds, that there's a diverse input into what the innovation is and what the ideas are. But I think where we face a challenge, if I kind of flip the question slightly, is in that what I call permafrost middle management layer, where the KPIs haven't filtered down, where the drive and understanding and knowledge is at a level where they can say, okay, this is the right thing to do. That's when most of the communication, awareness, education, at least from my experience, is targeted. And then to shift the people agenda in terms of how do you make sure it's not just about behavior, it's not just about education, it's about communication. And Lam and I spent, and Rian, quite a bit of time talking about this, tailoring the communication for the different audiences that you are engaged with so that they can understand what you're saying, and translating it to a language that is common for those audiences.
If I can build on what you were mentioning about the permafrost layer, one thing that came up for us in our last roundtable, which you are obviously a part of, was that so many of the middle management, because it's kind of the sustainability work is not a kind of key KPI that's done more out of the goodness of their heart. I always go back to the gender parity question, and Karen, I think it's incredible that you guys have 50-50 gender parity across the entire organization, because when you look at natural inclinations towards sustainability attitudes, there was a survey done last year. 87% of British women are making concerted effort in their day-to-day lives to live more sustainably compared to 59% of men. And I just always am thinking about how does that ultimately transport back into their work and their organization. How can we leverage that when we're looking to support middle management, that permafrost layer.
Yeah, thank you. Karen, did you want to
just add on?
Tussling for the mic.
Yeah, we've all got lots to say, I think. Very passionate about the topic. For us, it works in a couple of different ways. Many of you probably don't know we're set up as a foundation. If you heard about Patagonia and what they did a couple of years ago, we did something similar in the 80s, where we're set up as a sort of a foundation where 85% of what we make goes back into the business to reinvest back into the business, and also share a bonus structure across everybody gets it, not just the executives. And then 15% goes to the IKEA Foundation, which is our philanthropic arm. So we're privately owned. We don't owe any money to anybody. We, the ethos from the Testament of a Furniture Dealer and our original founder was to make money before we spend it. And that gives us a really long-term view. So we don't have to think in quarters, we can think in generations. And at the same time, we have a board that holds us to account to move with speed, and they actually want us to accelerate. I have a CEO who could basically be a CSO as well. He is super passionate. He drives advocacy. He's co-chair of the B team. He will step up as replacement for Paul Polman in the UN Global Compact as vice chair, and he's also co-chair of the WEF Climate Leaders CEO Alliance. So we have the advocacy there and driving policy change, and he's also super impatient and energetic. So we get that drive from the top. But we also know it's a great attractor and retainer of talent. Many people who don't work in my team, don't work in sustainability, come to IKEA because of what we do, what we stand for, our culture and values, and our sustainability leadership. And that is a business opportunity, because every time you lose a member of staff after you've trained them up, there's a cost associated, not just the financial cost, but also about happy customers and engagement with customers. And then we also have a Young Leaders Forum, who are external activists from around the world, all corners of the world, even in areas where we don't have IKEA stores, who hold us to account, who will look at our annual report and our strategy and be very demanding, quite rightly, on what we need to change and do better. So we also want to engage more with wider society to hold us to account as well.
Thank you. Rian?
Yeah, so I was going to butt in, sorry. And so one of the things I see at National Grid, so we're in electricity networks. We basically own the wires that get the electricity from where it's generated to people's homes and businesses. so increasingly more renewable energy. So one of the things I've found stepping into this role is there's no distinction between what we do in our strategy and sustainability, and I think that's not true in every sector, but in ours it just is what we do. It's part of our DNA, and everybody is there to enable the energy transition. So we're not having to basically persuade, I don't think, middle managers in the same way that was the link. 'Cause I think they're all on board actually, and I don't quite see the same. We have middle management challenges on other issues, but not on sustainability. But the one thing we do notice is that a lot of people come in with real passion and real drive to do things differently, and dare I say, sort of idealism. And so one of the things I think we have to manage with as a CSO is the balance between being the conscience of the business but being pragmatic, because you're still in a commercial organisation that needs to operate commercially, and there's a trade-off. Actually, there can be trade-offs. So you want to. I find there are days when I want to absolutely encourage everyone to go further, and there are days when I want to say, we just need to be careful. We've still got to serve our customers. We still got to make sure energy gets to people's homes reliably. So I can see people nodding.
And just to add to that, because I'm an economist by background, and it's that balancing the seesaw of emissions reductions but financial returns, because it cannot be sustainability at all costs, otherwise we have no more businesses. And so if you put people back at the center of sustainability, is how do we meet that long-term deliverable of financial returns but also capturing emissions reductions. So one of the things that I advocate now is that total value creation, whereby you've got your strategy, which is owned by your CEO, you've got your financial returns, which is owned by your CFO, and then the CSO comes in with that emissions or the carbon reduction piece. And when you look at your strategy and the work you do from those three lenses, then you have a better chance of having a going concern as a business, and not just, let's stop everything, because stopping everything doesn't really solve the problem, right? There are unintended consequences, so yeah.
Can I just build on Rianne's point as well on that? We have, so yes, I'm not a sustainability specialist, but in my team we have many that are and live and breathe it. They don't drive cars, they're vegans, they walk everywhere and commute on public transport and so on. And there's a tendency, if you're not careful, to have sort of Jesus syndrome, where I'm going to save the world and I'm going to save IKEA. And there's a risk of burnout as well. So we really need to look after the mental health of those that, well, everybody, of course, all our co-workers, but particularly those that are really living and breathing and are super impatient for us to move faster. We have to bring the business along with us. We have to speak the same common language. Otherwise, you are not relevant to the business, and you then don't get a seat at the table for the big decisions. So we have to do it.
And you get organ rejection, right? So they just continue to push back. So while sustainability people are saying we need to upskill the rest of the organization on sustainability, I always say we also need to upskill sustainability people on commercials, because it's a two-way street. It's not a one-way.
So if you need to be pragmatic, I think you also need to be resilient and then patient.
Thank you. It was interesting, there was a point made on this stage yesterday actually about the difference between kind of the puritanical approach to sustainability versus incrementalism, and how being so puritanical can actually intimidate people and shame people actually, that you're not there, you're not good enough, and that kind of thing. And that feels particularly important with internal buy-in. And you talked about this commercial angle and making sure that we're commercializing sustainability as brought into the bottom line of the business. How important is it to communicate that to those young leaders, the kind of more junior roles who perhaps are coming in sometimes idealistically saying we're going to save the world? How important is that, and how do you do it effectively in a way that doesn't crush their spirits or make it feel hard or make it feel cold or all of that stuff?
Sorry, I'll stop offering. Less about young people actually, but we're 50-50 UK-US, and in the US we're in New York and Massachusetts, and we have a big gas distribution business. And the way it operates in the US is we distribute the gas into people's homes, and we're on the energy bill, so we're basically a network and an energy retailer. And what we find is that the conversation about gas and heating and decarbonising people's homes is really tricky, and so we've had what we're trying to do is find a balance, because we don't want all of our workforce to feel disenfranchised. We don't want them to think there's no future, and I think you can get carried away, and I think we sort of ran that risk a little bit, saying we need to decarbonise heat, and everybody sort of went, well, there's no role for us in the future, and we're like, no, we need you. There's a way forward. We need to decarbonise, but we're not saying this is the end to our business. We're saying there are options on renewable, natural gas and hydrogen. And everybody sort of went, and had a sigh of relief because they're thinking there's a future for us. So I think it's like spelling it out and showing people how they fit into the future. So it's not quite young leaders, but it wasn't a workforce that were thinking, well, do we fit in? Do we have a role?
Vera, I want to come to you.
I just wanted to add to that because I love the value creation point that Lama was making in terms of how do you orchestrate value and how do they translate it. It's really important that you nuance the message, whether it's finance, whether it's younger generations, whether it's the innovators, to the language that they speak and they understand so that they can be on the same journey, on the same bus. I kind of admit that probably about 8 years ago when I first had an idea to set up a business from a sustainability perspective, I thought everybody was on the same bus. We were all going in the same direction. The level of understanding and knowledge was on par. And then what I very quickly learned was actually, no, it isn't. And people have an allergic reaction if they think their livelihood is at risk. And it's about saying a holistic resilience approach is really important. And then splitting it into what I call the two-speed business. So you've got the visionary, the strategic, the drivers that are looking at it much longer term. And then you have those that want impact immediately. And then trying to find a balance between projects, activities, initiatives, engagement that address both needs. Because you would do that for any other topic within the business. No matter what, whether it's a challenge or strategy, you would look at it that way. You would do a vision and strategy, and then you would do quick wins to be able to get everyone on board. The same applies, the same principles and logic applies to sustainability. And last point I'd like to add is one of the things where I'm seeing success in that permafrost area is saying, if we've got projects and activity, whether it's a transformation from a digital perspective, whether it's a new system we're implementing, whether it's something completely irrelevant from a sustainability perspective, but if you can sort of infuse it in and say, actually, if you go on a digital journey, this is what you're saving from an environmental, social, and governance perspective, people buy into it. If you design with kind of inclusion at the front, people buy into it. So there's that kind of mutual story, and you constantly need to be balancing between different audiences. Sorry.
I was going to say from just personal experience as a younger woman in sustainability, for every one of my peers that's really enthusiastic about what the future holds for reversing climate change, there's just as many who are very negative about it. I myself have a lot of climate anxiety. I mean, you see things every day. I saw yesterday that the AMOC might be collapsing in the next 6 months. It's like, I'm fortunate to work for a company that has like a great network set up already that's focused on sustainability. I have peers where I can talk to about this. We're very clear about what we're doing as an organization to not contribute to global warming and climate change and do our part to make sure that we're responsible stewards of that. But I think it's a combination of, not dampening their enthusiasm, not dampening their spirits, but also making sure there's some sort of mental health and like encouragement for those young people as well, like to show them that there is positive that you can do.
Yeah, can I just add on that? I think the important thing is to lead with optimism and hope, but it shouldn't be blind optimism. It needs to be optimism based on agency and action. So really showing the way. So many solutions exist today. We unlock the finances, we collaborate and share, we have the solutions. So it's about coming together. And then for many of our co-workers, they say, I don't work in sustainability. I work in Ingka Investments, but they're investing in wind and solar and doing a fantastic job there. Or the people on the shop floor, which is the majority of the people in IKEA, where we have 170,000 co-workers. If they can help customers to make a better decision, whether it's switching to plant-based meals because we've made it a lower price than the meat-based alternative, whether it's helping them to see how they'll reduce their waste and energy bills at home by buying things, or even just sharing the knowledge. They don't actually have to buy things, but just sharing our knowledge. We do buyback schemes, we repair things, so every co-worker on the shop floor can play their part, whether they're sorting cardboard and waste in the back or whether they're helping customers on the shop floor to make a better business decision. And then I think it is also about making sure every individual can see that it does matter what they do. Everybody can have an impact. And I often use with our co-workers the quote from Robert Swan, who's an Arctic explorer, who said the greatest risk to our planet is that the belief that someone else will fix it. So if everybody thinks someone else is going to solve the problem, we're in trouble. So they need that agency.
And just to mention, I think it's really fascinating that when you look at the research, everybody thinks that other people don't care as much. as they actually do. Everyone thinks, I care about it a lot, but other people don't really care about it. And actually, that sharing, it just reassures you that actually we're all on the same page. We all care, just because we're not doing anything about it necessarily in some places. If we're on the journey, that's okay.
Well, I think it comes back to that communication piece, right? We've got to communicate, but also communicate in a language that is understandable, in simple language. A lot of sectors tend to have a lot of shorthand, and so we stay in our echo chamber and talk to only each other, and we don't bring our customers on the journey, we don't bring our employees on the journey. And so if we want to manage expectations from the younger generation all through to society, the civil society, we've got to tell them what's going on. We've got to manage expectations. And when it comes back to, decarbonization, it's about lives and livelihoods. We've got to remember that some jobs will they're at risk, but you can reskill people, you can upskill people and retrain. So gas engineers today can still work in molecules if that's what they like, because we're going to have hydrogen, we're going to have biomethane. But no one's telling them, because all we're saying we need to electrify everything. It's like, no, but we cannot electrify everything. We still need some molecules. And so your role would need to change. And as an organization, I'm going to help you on that journey if you want to. And it's like AI, for example, right? It's creating a whole lot of anxiety. But the truth of the matter is that brains with AI would definitely be in a better position than brains without AI. But it doesn't mean that AI is going to replace everyone in this room. So there's still jobs and things that we need to do as humans, and we just forgot to put the human back in resources. So, yeah.
Thank you. I want to pivot a little bit into suppliers and Scope 3, because obviously really, really crucial set of stakeholders there. And I think increasingly as businesses are doing their auditing, they're just realising the scale of their Scope 3 emissions that they hadn't perhaps been tuned into. Many people in this room will have businesses of different sizes, and they'll have suppliers of different sizes. And some of those suppliers are very, very small, 1 or 2 or 5 people. Some, obviously, like some on the panel here, are huge. How do we get suppliers on board, and particularly for those smaller businesses, those SMEs, where suddenly it's a bit of a shock to the system and they're having to get all of this stuff very quickly and they perhaps don't have the resources? What is important in engaging and really empowering those suppliers?
Should I go? I mean, we're a retailer that produces things and sells things, so we have a huge Scope 3, about 98%. I know for many companies it's over 90% as well. And the biggest majority of our Scope 3 sits in our materials. So we need to switch to more renewable and recycled materials, and we need to do that together with our suppliers. And we're on that journey, so we're sitting around 56% renewable and 17% recycled, but it will take a while to get there, as some products are just much harder to recycle or use renewable materials than others. And then it's also about supporting, we have what we call iWay, the IKEA way with our suppliers. It's actually very hard to become an IKEA supplier, and you have to sort of jump through hoops and do a lot of good work on testing, on quality, on human rights, how you treat your co-workers and the facilities offered to co-workers, as well as environmental due diligence. But then we're helping them with grants to electrify their supply. So how it's produced is also part of our Scope 3, the energy used to produce. The shipping, we're part of the coalition to decarbonise the shipping industry by 2040 with companies like Maersk and so on as well. And then at Ingka Group, the retail side, we have nearly 3 million small business customers. So many people, well, of course, people come as consumers to shop for their homes, but hairdressers, small legal offices, jewelers, everybody, plant shops, flower shops, they come and buy our furniture to really, put in their stores and their shops, and we see it all the time. I get a great delight going into a boutique and seeing our beautiful lights or chairs or whatever. So we have joined forces with the We Mean Business Coalition for the SME Hub, Climate Hub. It's a great free resource that helps people to create climate plans. So I think it's about really how can we be a force for good to help small businesses there with our business network.
Right, so those networks, those collectives, kind of power in numbers. Vera, I know you're poised to speak.
I just wanted to build on that because I'm seeing a shift in terms of change in relationships, no longer being suppliers but being partners. And I think that's a nuance in the word in terms of, the boundary of what our role is shifting and actually opening up and saying we're in a partnership. To your point, Lama, earlier, if we don't help our SMEs transition, they're not going to be at the table because a lot of the requirements right now, whether they be regulatory, disclosure, an actual just business policy mean that if our suppliers don't meet those thresholds, they no longer be at our table, but nobody else's table. So we have a duty of care to bring them on that journey. There's another emerging aspect, which is a public-private partnership in this area. As a UK economy, we're structured with a lot of SMEs. How do we, as a public body, so UK PLC, help them transition? And that's through grants and free education and awareness. And then if we think about it from an FS perspective and Scope 3, one of the largest categories is Category 15, which is financed emissions. So that's your lending book, whether it be to consumers, to small businesses, to farmers, as an example. And what we're seeing is a real shift in terms of saying we need to retrofit our homes. UK housing stock is some of the worst in Europe in terms of energy efficiency and leakiness, and a lot of that is linked to history because not a lot of our homes have been rebuilt through the centuries. So what does that mean that we need to do as a financing body? How do I make sure that the loans that I'm giving are more green? That requires us to educate consumers. How do we change some of those behaviors and then create a platform where we can bring the suppliers that can do the retrofitting for you and provide the appropriate financing with the appropriate terms so that you're not paying a premium. But then also look at how do we focus on social housing as an example, and how do we change both in terms of public policy and some of the design principles exist to include new materials, new metals that are more sustainable in the future. So there's a real kind of ecosystem coming together, and I really appreciate that ecosystems and partnerships, and I choose the word partnerships on purpose, is shifting how people think about it. You know, if we look at farmers, agriculture, it's an area that we all need to focus on, but how do you support farmers whose primary objective is survival?
Can I just build on that? Because I think that partnership and ecosystem conversation is also looking at our supply chain and value chains. They are expanding beyond the traditional spaces. So I'm in an energy business and you're financing agricultural people. But if I go in with a biomethane proposal, I'm creating a circular economy for the agricultural sector, but also getting green gas for my sector. And so we need to speak beyond our regular spaces where we've been interacting before, because many businesses were trained up in terms of the capitalism to compete and not cooperate. And so changing that mindset also takes time. But also we have to remember that everyone's scope 1 and scope 2 is somebody's scope 3. So if we all focus on our 1 and 2, then 2/3 of scope 3 will resolve itself to a large extent, and then you have that last mile. And that's what then you need to bother about. But right now we're all falling over ourselves on scope 3, not really doing much on 1 and 2. So if we just go back to first principles and each of us fix our operations and what needs to happen there, and then also work in that intersectoral kind of way. So for us, for example, we need to be talking more and more with automobile industry, because they cannot roll out all of that electric vehicles if I'm not producing the green electrons to charge it. And they need to be talking to the construction industry, because by the time we all have EVs and we need to park in multi-story car parks in cities, then we have to make sure that the safety and integrity of those car parks are intact. So you can see how quickly that intersectoral clash is starting to happen through the energy transition, because it is expanding. And last bit, we also need to make sure we have sustainable mining, because we're not going to get all the critical minerals that we need. And we're not used to talking to people that are not in our space. But your space is no longer small. It's a whole lot bigger, and it's in a different sector sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm just going to put a shout out to the audience. We're going to be taking questions in a couple of minutes, so do prepare your questions. There'll be a roving mic coming around. In terms of go on, Rianne, I know you're dying to say something.
Well, no, on this one I wasn't actually. I thought I'd let everybody else speak on supply chains, because it's really difficult actually, really, really tough, and you'll have all had good experience. I think we feel like we're very much on the journey on this one, and actually a little bit in listening mode. I mean, we've got targets to work with our suppliers in the UK, 80% to have science-based targets by 2030. I think that helps in terms of creating the framework. We've also found, to the point about partnerships, that when we work with our suppliers, it's actually better to do it in a done with rather than done to. So we've had a couple of really great experiences this year where we've been talking to our suppliers about, well, how do you set targets? And they have actually sort of said, well, you could get them validated by the Science Based Targets Initiative, and they sort of, and it's encouraged them. So we've been sharing our expertise to encourage them to think more about how they embed this in their business. But we've also we had our annual results about a month ago, and we announced that we're going to be increasing our investment in the next 5 years by £30 billion to 2029. So we'll be investing £60 billion. So suddenly that's quite a lot of things that we're going to be building and a lot of things that we're going to be buying. And so we're really having to sort of think again, well, actually, what does it mean? How do we partner with our suppliers? How far down the supply chain do we go? And actually, for a business like ours, what are the trade-offs? Because if we slow down our buying and our building because we want to wait for the right solutions to come along, others, your businesses, your homes won't get clean power. So how do we make the trade-off between pace and sustainability? And that, I think that's an honest conversation. I think there will need to be some trade-offs. So it might be in everyone's advantage. We will, by the way, this is not an excuse for inaction. Of course, there's things we can do, but we might not get all of the way there, and it might be an advantage of everybody else and the economy as a whole. Our job is to enable everybody else, do what we can properly and take it seriously, but we won't get all the way there, and that's to everybody's advantage.
Thank you. And I wanted to touch on the sense of partnership again as well, because I'd imagine that part of that is about the storytelling and sharing in the wins and the celebrations as much as it is bringing them along on the ambition. Have you got any examples of where you've been able to actually share the successes with suppliers and for them to be part of that story and part of that?
So I can share. So I think for us, and policy is a big piece of it, but on the island of Ireland in the Republic, so we created what we call the one-stop shop. So we're an energy retailer, but we also are in a country that has a great climate action plan with grants. So we created a one-stop shop to enable customers come to us if they wanted to retrofit. But we're not a construction company. So what we did in the background is create the whole line of partnerships that can then share in that value creation and get everyone to understand the value proposition of being part of that journey. And so it's been so successful in the Republic that our retrofit business is now actually doing slightly better than, and so it's about having that vision, and that's from that climate leadership perspective, is having a vision, communicating that vision, building the partnership, deploying the resources, both human and financial capital, and then communicate. You cannot over-communicate in this space because there is too many things going on, too many moving parts, and you just have to bring people, assure people that, where the value lies and what is in it for them, because if they can't see what is in it for me, then it's hard to bring them, change that motivation. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say for us, we both have the really large scale through Ingka Investments, and we have the small scale through our social entrepreneur scheme. So on the large scale, with the separate investment arm that we have, we've sort of gone really big on renewables, buying into recycling manufacturing. In Netherlands alone, together with an industrial mattress supplier and a recycling part of the municipalities in the Netherlands, we can recycle 1.5 million mattresses a year that don't go to landfill. They don't have to be IKEA mattresses. We help collect them and so on. So being able to set up a co-funded organisation like that, we're also invested in the largest plastic recycler in Europe as well, and we're looking to expand that circular portfolio. So I think particularly in circular and going large scale, but also investing in offshore and onshore wind. We're now almost a medium-sized energy company, sort of equivalent to 1.5 million European homes get energy via Ingka and IKEA. And then on the small scale, at a very grassroots level, having social entrepreneurs that we partner with, really looking at how we help build up these very small organisations, often people that can't get onto the employment ladder, and being able to offer them employment that adds value to our business. So it's not charity, they're adding commercial value to our business and to themselves, and then they're being able to really collaborate with us. And we've got sort of examples where we've got people gathering our cardboard waste in Paris, and then also doing home deliveries by cargo bike for us as well in the streets of Paris, where we're now really seeing a move away from using any trucks and so on in the heart there. So we have lots of good examples with very small scale entrepreneurs all around the world where we feel we can help lift them up and then tell those stories to customers, because customers love it. They really want to know about what's happening in their local neighbourhoods.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, I think we're going to come to questions. Put your hand up. Yes. Where's the microphone? Thank you. There's the guy at the front. I know he was very eager.
Thank you. Thanks, Denise, and thanks to all the panelists. I think it was a very insightful talk, probably one of the best ones I've heard, actually, so thank you. I think people and culture are quite critical to change. I'm Trisha Patel, CEO of Vivacity. My question is, just keen to understand your thoughts as global sort of organisational CSOs, that when you have a stakeholder group which spans multiple regions, that may have different appetites for sustainability or climate. For example, let's say, Karen, you've got a board which is half Scandinavian or Swedish, may have been geared more towards green than maybe a consumer base for some of the energy providers in the UK or operations in Massachusetts or Houston. How would you sort of manage, or any thoughts on having different stakeholder groups in different parts of the world who are being perhaps raised in a particular way or are impacted by the effects of climate more so, they belong to a particular region, and then sort of getting the right messaging and narratives out to them, even to perhaps the janitor in, say, Houston, who's sending the woman to Mars or something like that? Thank you.
I think it's a very good question, by the way, thank you. I think we mix a blend of mandatories that sort of come from what we call the group functions, and we then sort of localized. So the country CSOs that I mentioned before, who are also the CEOs in each country, get a goals letter each year, which is quite heavily steered towards this fully balanced scorecard of value creation goals. You know, happy customers, co-worker engagement, the financials, of course, the bottom line, market share, sales growth, and CO2 emissions, and also what they do with social engagement, social impact too. So everybody gets that letter. They have to sign it and agree to it. And of course, there can be some back and forth. So it's not only top down because they understand their markets more than we do. But then, you know, if they get a CO2 goal, if they're in Japan or South Korea, what they have to drive in terms of, it might be more renewable heating and cooling, it might be more zero emission deliveries. Our team of experts are on hand to help them and advise, but they know their partners and they know their market, they know their policies in the different countries as well, so they can steer it. The how part we leave to them. So we really like to, one of our values is give and take responsibility. So we like to really empower people to be able to take responsibility and say, this is how I'm going to achieve the carbon goal here, this is how I'm going to achieve the social impact goal. We have a Refugee Skills for Employment program. We've put 2,000 refugees through that program around the world, and helping them to get employment, get dignity back, get a sense of place and home again after they've had the trauma of having to move from their home. And in countries like Japan and South Korea, there are no refugees. So then they find what's relevant for them in their market with the social impact that they can have for those most disenfranchised and need the most help. So it's very much a mix of clear steering on the what, and then we leave the how to those who are experts in their area.
And just to build on that up, because I think it's really important that we also understand when we're kind of communicating with stakeholders, you've got to check, do they have the capability or the capacity to understand what you're talking about? Is there an opportunity to practice it? So if you don't have refugees in Japan, so what else can you do? So you've got to create that opportunity. But the last and the critical thing that you need to change behavior is motivation. And you've got to understand people's motivation. And unless those three things are true, then that behavioral change or the shift you want to create, really slows down.
I would just add on that then, one of the lucky things with IKEA is we don't have the why question. So if you've got that common North Star that you spoke about before, Lame, and the vision of, for us, that's creating a better everyday life for the many people and having a sense of purpose and direction in the business, we don't have to have the why conversation. So the motivation is there. It's more the how and the when and how fast, we can do it.
Opportunity becomes what you need to create. Yeah.
Rianne, did you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, we're not global in the same way. We're only in 2 countries. But I was going to make a really small point, because we're only in 2 countries, about the language. Because although America, we think we're aligned, actually we can have the same conversation and be talking in opposite directions. So we sort of try, I think one of the things we can do is lean in to languages and the words and when they're used in other countries, and likewise backwards. And we're essentially a British company, so I think there's a risk at National Grid that we're too Anglophile sometimes, and so actually I've been making a real effort just to sort of use the right language and the right conversation, so there's a sort of you build rapport better that way, I think.
Thank you for your question. Hands up, this guy here in the white shirt.
Hi everyone. Question for Rianne and Lame. You both spoke about bringing along your workforces along the energy transition. And you spoke about disenfranchised workforce and employers coming along through the transition. I'm curious to know how you go about, or strategies you implement to basically ensure that you can do that.
So I can start from my side. So all of our job descriptions do have that net zero, because that is the company strategy at group level. So when you're applying to SSE, you're applying to a net zero strategy. So that's very clear. But then when they come in, it's creating the opportunities, because sometimes, so for somebody in the call center doing customer, engagement there, how do you then get them to think about their role in the conversations they're having with the customer to get the customer on board on net zero? And so there's a lot of training, and which is what we've been doing for the last 2.5 years through the Launch and Learns, is meeting them where they're at, right? And making sure that they have the right tools and strategies to navigate those conversations depending on where you are in the organization. Not everybody's in strategy, not everybody's in sustainability, but we're all working towards a net zero goal. And therefore, everyone needs to have the language and the tools to be able to do their job effectively to deliver that North Star. So it's about engagement. Yeah.
I'm not sure I have much to add. I mean, I think it starts from the top. So likewise, our purpose, our vision and our values are all linked to leading the energy transition. So you don't join National Grid if you aren't on board with that. And so I think everything kind of comes from that. And I think one of the challenges I sometimes find is I can't pull it out of what we do as a business. It is just part of our DNA. And so when someone says, oh, what's the value that sustainability adds to the business? I had to scratch my head. I'm like, it's what we do. So that's not very helpful, sorry.
No, it's not. It's the strategy. And I think it's for people, I mean, we have thousands of grads coming through the door every year and loads of jobs, and people want to join a company like ours because they want to help to deliver net zero, and they want to deliver a low carbon economy for the future generations. I think where people have challenge, and we've seen it as well, is when you come in with all the enthusiasm, but your day job is not, you can't really see how you're doing it. And so for us as leaders, we have that onus and that duty of care to ensure that our team members can reflect themselves in the mirror of that strategy, in the mirror of that delivery, and in how they serve the customers, because we're a customer business first. And if nobody's buying, then we really have no business. So we can generate as much green electrons, but we've still got to sell it, right? So it's really just from a leadership perspective, you've got to bring people with you.
I'm going to shout. Sorry, I'm interrupting again. I'm going to shout because I think SSE does a great job of understanding fair transition, actually. And you've got great examples. I was thinking back to the comment I made about people in our gas distribution business in the US, but you've got great examples of where you've moved your workforce from high fossil fuel plants into wind. And so I think it's that point about showing people what the future looks like and saying it's not that you don't have a role for this, but we need to change the role that you have and change the way that we work. And you've got really strong examples of that.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. Anyone towards the back? The lady, you know everything, don't you, by now? The lady in the yellow.
Thanks. My name's Olivia and I work at Heart of the City. So we're a charity that supports small businesses at the start of their sustainability and responsible business journey. So it's fantastic. I've really enjoyed the panel. Thank you so much. To hear everything that you're doing, my question really is, the small businesses that I work with, they're all in different sectors. They're across the UK. They don't have a sustainability lead. It's normally the office manager that I'm working with, and they get pulled by lots of different larger companies to input the data into different forms. So we've heard a lot about collaboration downwards through your supply chain. So I'm just interested in what collaboration is there within industry, with your competitors, so that a supplier can, be a supplier of SSE and then also work with other organisations so that they don't have to do the same kind of compliance that is being asked. Thank you.
So that's work in progress. And it's something that we all recognize now that, there are too many forms and there are too many lines. So, but coming back to the question about small businesses from different sectors. So when we did the business mentoring with business in the community, they were not really our suppliers. They were just small businesses that needed help. And because we had the resources and the people, and so it was kind of a pro bono type approach to just help them to start to think about their scope 1 and 2 and think about the things that they can start doing, whether it's energy efficiency, energy procurement, water, waste, those little things that can get them started on the journey. Because one thing we have to remember, let's not let perfection be the enemy of progress. And it's a lot of sustainability and ESG reporting can be put in the too hard buckets, and therefore we just kind of put it there and bury our heads. But we've also try to kind of deliver the value proposition narrative to these businesses is not only so that you can be in my procurement process, it's so that you can be in every procurement process, especially even public procurement, right? So if we can get them to understand the why it is important for their business continuity, then nobody can really argue with that. They really come on board and they want to learn and they want to do it. So it's the communication piece again. You've got to simplify it. So the way I would talk to somebody giving Vestas, for example, would be very different from the way I would talk to a mom and pop hairdressing salon, right? So meeting them where they're at.
I just want to build on that, kind of two lenses to it. One is, as representing a large organization with 300,000 people globally, a lot of my customers, my partners, ask the business to complete multitude of different forms, and every organization has come up with their own set of standards and their own set of science-based targets rather than using just SBTI. And it's actually coming to the table and having a debate and saying, right, this is what you're asking for. I don't want to talk about ticking the box in the template. I want to talk about as to why. What is the rationale behind asking these questions? Because based on the way you've asked them, I can't answer them, but I can show you I've done a better job, because it's a different mechanism or a different calculation or methodology I've used. So that's one aspect, actually coming to the table and pushing back and saying, explain the thought process behind it. And the second one I'm seeing is a lot of leveraging of technology, specifically you mentioned AI, in terms of using the ability to scan what's publicly available, use that information that's already there, and then pre-populate some of the information that is needed from small to medium businesses. So I'm seeing a real shift in terms of that desire to move one step ahead, and rather than putting the onus on the small businesses, saying, okay, give us the data, we'll figure out a way and build the models to be able to automatically extract what we need and then give it back to you. So I think those are two really important
Karen, I'm
points.
so sorry, we're going to have to wrap it up because there's another panel coming in. But thank you so much. It's been such a fascinating, I'm sure everyone's got as much out of it as I have. If anyone's interested in better connecting with consumers in particular, quick plug, we've got a workshop at 1:30 in one of those North Gallery rooms back there. Say Do Gap and Other Myths. Do come along, we've got some great tips and good hands-on stuff. But for now, please join me in thanking this wonderful panel. Cheers.
Thank you very much, everyone.